Welcome to Green Giants, Titans of Renewable Energy, the podcast where insights and innovation meet. Every episode, we dive into conversations with industry leaders, experts, and change makers, bringing you the stories and ideas in the renewable energy sector that shape our world. And now, let's jump into today's episode with your host, Wes Ashworth. Welcome to another episode of Green Giants, Titans of Renewable Energy. Today, we're honored to have a true pioneer in the renewable energy space joining us. John Berger is the chairman, president, and CEO of Sunnova, a company he founded in 2012 with a mission to bring energy independence to homeowners. With over 2 decades of experience in the electric power industry, John has been at the forefront of advancing energy technology and advocating for consumer choice and free market competition. Prior to Sunnova, he founded and led 2 other companies focused on renewable energy and solar services. John holds an MBA from Harvard Business School and a degree in civil engineering from Texas A&M University. John, we're thrilled to have you on the show today.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so we'll start at a really easy place. So you've been a key figure in the renewable energy industry for a long time. Can you share just a bit about your journey and what inspired you to start Sunnova?
Yeah, certainly. So I really consider myself that I've been in the power industry now for, you said, over 2 decades. Unfortunately, It's probably closer to the 30 years.
Right.
So I know I don't look it. Yeah.
Nope, not at all.
It's been a long time. I started on the power trading desk and really was more of a physical arbitrage. I spent some time even running a utility from the control room during the nights and weekends for a bit. And then moved up and started to actually trade a month ahead, day ahead power. And from there, really got a sense of that. I thought that the power system was at that point in time, and again, this is going to date me, it was back in the 90s when the internet was really coming about, was really, frankly, archaic in that, when you looked at the internet and what was going on then and what the potential we thought was going to be, and I think we've exceeded a lot of those thoughts in many cases. Short fell in a few, but exceeded them. It really stuck out to me that there was going to need to be a lot of changes. You couple that up with a growing sense that there was a climate crisis, that carbon was a problem. It confirmed for me that if you look back in history, we were way overdue for in 2 things. One, a major new source of energy, and then secondly, we were way overdue for a change in transportation technology. And so when you looked at that, I thought, you know what, I think things are going to change. So I started working in venture capital, then I founded the first firm, kind of fell into solar when I was doing a solar or a energy efficiency installation business, and started to see solar. It was very cheap. I sold that business and I thought, this stuff's, in terms of stuff, solar is going to get really cheap.
Yeah.
And that was a great call. Boy, I was more right than I could have possibly imagined. This is somewhere around, it's around in 2009.
Okay.
Then started another company that was like Sunnova, quickly sold that to NRG, a big power company. And then from there started, I said that worked and started Sunnova, which is basically a service company, a utility, wireless utility. And we do the financing, we keep the lights on. So it's our folks that roll trucks after storms and fix, the power. And then third, we aggregate and sell that power back into the wholesale system. And the view, to come full circle, is that the power system of the future, whether that's in a certain locational region, country, however you want to look at it, looks more like the internet than it does, over the last 130 years. And that means that you've got these big stations, could be combined cycle gas plants and so forth, that operate kind of like data centers.
Yeah.
And then you've got the endpoints of the system that are more efficient and do a better job being smaller, kind of like iPads, computers, cell phones, and so forth, smartphones that operate in the peripheral of the system. But they all, it's a network, and it's 2 ways, and it's all working together to deliver the best reliability at the best price. And that's exactly our view of where the power business is going to go. You're going to have a lot of different changes. It's no longer command control, Soviet style.
Yeah.
And we'll get into this, I'm sure, including the economic model and choices for consumers. But a lot of those change. That's where it all came from. That's what I was starting these businesses and really learning about. And now we're here with solar, with storage, with load management, with software, with EVs,
Yeah.
EV chargers, generators, all of that coming together to provide solutions to energy solutions to our customers.
Yeah, I love that story and just how that all came together. And I am curious, so back in 2012, when the company first was getting off the ground and starting, so that vision behind when you originally started it to where you look at today, I guess how has that vision evolved and changed over that course of time?
No, it really hadn't.
I was
I mean,
curious if you were going to say that.
there's others that have changed strategy
Yeah,
multiple times in the industry. We haven't. We've stuck with our financing strategy, keeping the
yeah,
cash flows. We've stuck with our view about what the industry was going to look like. And we just talked about that. We've stuck with our model using dealers instead of trying to do it on payroll. And the view has always been that we want to combine the utility power, grid power, with the solar and batteries and generators and load management, put all that together on a single bill and have that
yeah.
be a competitively shopped by the consumer service product. And so all that's coming together, and aggregation as part of that, and selling capacity and energy back in the wholesale system is something we envisioned years ago. So not much has really changed.
Consistent. Got it right. Got it right the first time. It's good. And I know a core focus is, as you can see, if anybody watching the video behind you, powering energy independence, and this is a big part of the core of what you're doing. And I know Sunnova is dedicated to providing consumer choice and energy independence. Can you explain why this is so critical in today's energy landscape? And how does Sunnova empower customers to take control of their energy future?
Well, what we do is we offer choice. We can come in and say, look, we can provide a different service, a better energy service at a better price. Let us show you that. Let us, here's what that would cost. Here's the contract that would, and this is what it looks like. This is the level of reliability that we can provide, and so forth.
Yeah.
And all of that is something that we do through our dealers. We've got a small direct desk, but that's about it. And we do a lot of those installs are farmed out to our install-only dealers. So it's trying to become that new utility, if you will, in a competitive environment, and offering competitive energy solutions to our customers.
Yeah, it's so much, it looks really unchanged since, kind of the industrial revolution of these reliance on, big power companies, and really you don't have much of a choice. So hearing that, as things evolve and there is more choice and there are more options there, and I think consumers are starting to pay attention and ask the right questions. So I think that's critical. Anything else that's important for the average consumer out there maybe to understand or to be thinking about in today's climate?
What the average consumer should think about?
Yeah.
I think they should think about looking at their utility bill. They sit in a monopoly area and think about why. How could you do better? First and foremost, it always gets me is that you can talk to a lot of businessmen and women, and they think capitalism and choice, consumer choice and competition works in their industry.
Yeah.
But when it comes to power, somehow it doesn't work.
Yeah.
For some unknown reason, force. And the true answer is it absolutely does work, and we need to have these choices. It doesn't mean we don't have regulations. By the way, the regulations need to be very much updated. And the technology has changed, the regulations have not. They need to be able to make sure that consumers are treated fairly. But with that said, we have new technologies, not unlike to mention the 90s again, when the cell phone came about and the internet and IP telephony. If the AT&T hadn't been broken up and that regulator hadn't been such a proponent of consumer choice, would all of that wave of innovation, including what became Apple and Google and everything else, would that have happened? I would put forth that it would not have.
Right. Okay.
And that is the beauty of our economic system as a country, and it's what every American wants, which is the right to determine who serves them and the right to determine their own future. Mm-hmm. And we've robbed every American of that, given the current system that we have in the power industry. We can sit there and argue. I would say there's no point in it, but argue about it, that the old system, the current Soviet-style system, worked for a while.
Right.
That's fine. The Soviet Union existed for a while before it collapsed under its
Mm.
own weight.
Yeah.
But I think what we're definitely seeing right now is a runaway freight train of costs that keep getting piled on.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, when you look at the cost pressures, the natural gas rates is at a level that is not consistent with profitability for the oil and gas companies.
Hmm.
So the rates increases that you've been seeing for all Americans are with a unsustainably low natural gas price. As that moves up, that's going to push rates up even further and faster. And there's already price increases even in what has been potentially maybe even going into deflation for at least a bit, but certainly the inflation rate has dropped materially at this point, even over the last year or so. And so we see, these rates are going in the opposite direction as everything else in the economy is doing, including deflation or
Right.
less inflation is probably it is a more accurate way of putting it. And we still have this natural gas pricing that can move up at least somewhat
Yeah.
those rates up just by themselves enough. So people are seeing no end in sight to rate increases, and
Sure.
they're right. And they're looking for alternatives. And when they're locked into a monopoly that's dictates what they're going to be, pay,
Yeah.
and then dictates the service quality on top of that. That is not a place that we, as Americans, have to put up with in anything else in our lives other than power.
Yeah, that's such a profound point, and just a new way to think about that. And it really is. It's unique, compared to every other industry and things like that out there. Is it, I guess, in your mind, from your perspective, what needs to change in order for that to change? Is it driven by the consumer level? Is it driven by the regulatory level, or by enterprises, or is it a mix of all of those things?
I think it's driven by, well, let me say this: consumers are also called something else,
Yeah,
voters.
yeah,
If you want a choice, if you want to not pay a power bill that's now in some parts of the country, has been reported the last few weeks that rivals the mortgage bill. Think about that. With
that's
mortgage
insane.
rates have skyrocketed and the power bill's going north of that. I mean, you have a problem. Getting people upset enough to
Hmm.
stop listening to the lies of the politicians who've been
Right.
paid off by the Union of the Utilities, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, the
Sure.
utilities folks. I mean, we've seen these corruption scandals all across the country. Politicians have gone to jail in Ohio. There's been corruption scandals in other areas of the country as well. And we shouldn't be surprised because you're having a very small group of politicians and people essentially, quote, manage the money that these utilities are getting. And the
Yeah.
utilities in many areas of the country, this blows me away, actually have the ability to take your money and spend it in a way that tells you that they should get more of it. And think about like
Yeah.
politics, all that's illegal. You try to do that
Yeah.
and you go to jail. And so
Right.
you've seen a number of states, starting with the state of Colorado, pass laws to prevent that very thing from happening. If you think a utility is going to go to a playground and spend some of the shareholder dollars on that playground just to make you feel good about your bill going up,
Uh-huh.
think again, it's your money.
Yeah.
Now you may get an outsized share of it because of that playground. You can utilize that more than somebody else that helped pay for it. But
Yeah.
again, all this is being socialized, and those funds are being used. Those are your funds. That's your money that's being paid.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's one of these, it's such a mindset shift. And I think an awakening in a way of just the realization of that. Hopefully some aha moments are happening out there. Digging more into just decentralization of power systems, and you've compared the future of power systems to the internet, which I love that analogy, with a focus on decentralization. Can you elaborate on that vision and how you see it reshaping the way just we generate and consume electricity?
Yeah, it's interesting here, and this is where you're starting to see some of this aha moment on those folks that I mentioned earlier that love capitalism, love
Yeah.
business, love competition, love consumer choice, except in the power industry. And then somehow they
Right.
think that that's, the utilities, they justify universal service and everything else. By the way, you just charge for universal service in a bill. That's what the AT&T and the Baby Bells did. Somehow
Yeah.
that worked there, but it's not going to work here. I mean,
Uh-huh.
it's a lot of this. It's interesting. It's in the AI data center world. As they become, wait a minute, I've got to serve all this load that I'm creating by doing AI. I want to put generation on my side of the meter and it's cheaper,
Uh-huh.
right? And so then the utility, well, time out. Like we're supposed to get a hunk of that flesh. And people are like, yeah, why can't we do that? And the industrials, in this case, the data centers are like, well, no, wait a minute. If we can do this cheaper than you, and it's
Right.
more reliable because it's on site,
Yeah.
what's wrong with that? Why don't I have a right to do that? And so you're starting to see that argument happen where the utilities arguing its monopoly right to
Yeah.
serve. And the industrial's like, well, no, that doesn't make any sense. If it's my money and I put it up and I have another company that comes out, could be somebody like us that can operate the essentially the microgrid, right?
Yeah.
And be able to do it at a good reliability. Why shouldn't I have the option to do that in a free economy, in a free country? So you're seeing a lot of that, start to, when you look at the internet analogy I just made, the internet itself is, if you will, with AI and so forth,
Right.
some of this realization of, you know what, things need to change here. Just
Yeah.
because you're going to wire across a property line doesn't make, it doesn't mean that you're really doing something that should be illegal. That's crazy.
Sure.
And in a
Yeah.
large number of states, it's exactly the case. The utility will say that that's their monopoly, is to run a wire. So if you had an outsized battery or generator and you wanted to run a wire across for several of your neighbors and provide them power in emergency, in many states that's illegal to do.
Which is wild to think about. And this is semi-related, but in terms of just the increasing power demands out there, and this is somewhat related to the data centers and AI, they're consuming more power, and I think as we continue, require more and more power. And so, and this is, I think, a good pathway to regards of what side of the fence you sit on. We need more power from alternative sources. It's great, coming from clean sources and things like that as well too, and the impact on the environment. But even if that's not your main motivator, it's that the power demand is still rising, right? And so I know that Sunnova plays a key role in meeting that surge in power demand. How does the solar and storage offerings contribute to addressing those current energy challenges in the U.S. and the increase in power demand?
Well, what we do there, a lot of people, I guess let me back up. I don't know what percentage of the AI, power demand increase is just the data centers, but it's not 100%. And so part of, say if it's half or a little less than half, that still means that it's the demand that's growing because of AI and more intense usage of the computers, use just a layman's term, it definitely is causing demand to move up materially more than it has in the past. You couple that with re-onshoring industry, so think about all the steel smelting, think about the LNG terminals down here in Texas.
Right.
These things consume an enormous quantities of power, and those industries had primarily been, like, for instance, steel smelting in China. And so now we're bringing all this back. But on top of that, then you have electric vehicles, electrification of heating.
Sure.
There's a lot of different trends in the economy that have been measured in some cases, certainly years, in some cases maybe even decades, like electric heating. So when you look at that, you've got a very bullish picture for the first time in 2 decades in the power industry. And so I think now where we need to all realize is that it's going to take a combination. I personally think if you look at Texas, for instance, we hit peak load here. It's called roughly about 85 gigawatt hours or so. It's a little bit higher than that. But if about, by the end of the decade, let's say it's another 20 on top of that, that's a pretty good growth rate to say. That's probably about right, what we think.
Sure.
And about half of that additional gigawatt hours is going to be met with natural gas combined cycle units, in our opinion, and about the other half is going to be met with solar and storage.
Sure.
And I think that's right. I mean, that's a general trend. I think solar and storage continues to pick up, an outsized portion of the growth, and gas will grow maybe a little bit, maybe not, but it's certainly coal. I'm not a big believer in the wind business being a huge growth engine. I think we've picked a lot of the good spots over the years. Happy to be wrong, but. It's also on the hydro side that hasn't grown in I don't know how long,
right?
And nuke is not an answer, and because we can't seem to find a way to really get the cost down. We keep trying. Vogtle, the expansion was the recent one. That was a unmitigated financial disaster in any way you look at it. There's no good way to look at that and say that it was somewhat of a success, other than saying, well, it's carbon-free power. Okay, but there is a lot cheaper ways of getting carbon-free power out of solar and storage, whether it's in front of the meter or in the terms of a solar farm or behind the meter like what we do. So I think all of that means is that we're going to need to see growth in the ability to generate clean power, but at the same time, we are going to have some growth in the hydrocarbon-based power, namely natural gas, in our opinion. Sure. And we think overall emissions will continue to come down rather dramatically as we continue to drop the use of coal, and that and again, solar and storage we think grows much faster than natural gas fired generation.
Yeah, no, I love that analysis. Kind of getting further into that and looking ahead over the next 5 to 10 years, being well connected, you're a senior leader in the space, you've been in it a long time. What are your predictions for the industry looking over the next 5 to 10 years? And then how is solar and storage technology evolving, especially in response to, like we said, to increased power demand, also grid instability, which we haven't talked about, and rising utility rates, which we did hit on. What's that look like over the next 5 to 10?
Well, I think we are entering a crisis phase where you have a ratepayer revolt. I don't know exactly where that starts. California is way out of control. The governor put forth gutting net metering out in California, and the industry, our industry, was seen as portrayed as by the utilities as the reason for all these rate increases. But yet when they gutted net metering, they raised rates 85%.
Yeah.
And they had raised rates previous to that too.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure that was a lie. The numbers don't reflect the reality. And so I think a lot of people are getting wise to this. It's very clear to us that that's what's happening. Is that happening in other areas of the country? Yes, it is. And again, why is it so bad to have choice? Like when you look at Houston, Dallas, even there's some things that we could do on the regulatory structure in Houston, Dallas to make this better for consumers, in my opinion. But if you did nothing but that, why couldn't you do that as you have new technologies that can be wrapped into a single bill and let companies like mine compete for your business, deliver a better reliability, deliver a better price? And if we want to take some things like wholesale pricing risk, so for instance, if I wanted to give everybody a little bit more battery, but for free, but I get the use of it to basically sell into the wholesale market so that I can take a trading position like I used to do to sell out when the power prices have spiked higher, just like they did last week and here in Texas, then I should be able to do that. Yeah. And maybe I win and maybe I lose. That's up for my shareholders to vote on what they want to do. But as a consumer, you win no matter what, right? You got battery for a little bit. In some cases, maybe you got a little bit battery in this example for free. So those are the kind of things that you're not going to get from a utility, because even when they give you a pilot program, that money's coming from someplace. Where's it coming from? You. That's where it's coming from.
Yeah.
And in this case, this is and it stifles market innovation. It stifles competition. If you don't have any competition, then when you come to work, do you really get pushed to do something that you wouldn't have, felt good, uncomfortable, right? About doing? Do you work as hard? Really? You don't. Mm-hmm. You don't do it, and that's why our system works, and that's why we're here. And frankly, the Soviet Union isn't here anymore.
Yeah, well said. Well said. And being such a advocate for consumer choice in this space, as you said, is not readily accepted and is unusual compared to other industries. So being an advocate for consumer choice where it's not readily accepted and maybe not there as a commonplace, I guess what are some of the challenges you face, leading a company pushing for that? And then how do you stay motivated to push for change? Where really, and this is called Green Giants, but you're up against some giants, as you look at the future and what's pushing against you.
Well, it's not easy. And I would say that, being the solar company in Houston, I mean, Houston's attracting a lot, and we new type of companies, renewable companies, and we do, I think, have a very good future in being the energy capital world, not just the oil and gas capital world.
Sure.
So I think with all of that said, we started 12 years ago when that not necessarily was the case. We're used to adversity. We grew up in it. So we're kind of that kid that grew up on the wrong side of the track, and we're tough, and
Yeah.
you have to be tough because you're dealing with people that they can be a little mean and
Uh-huh.
tough. I mean, just I gave you an example of what happened with California. Was
Right.
that fair? No, it wasn't fair. A lot of lies used, yes.
Yeah.
A lot of what was going on. Why did certain people vote certain ways? Well, I'll let y'all use your imagination. Usually, following the money works,
Right.
and so when you look at all of this, yeah, it's deck is you're going up against some giants, and a lot of people go, you'll never be successful. The utility system is in monopoly system is so entrenched, it's never going to change, and all that. And I just refuse to acknowledge, to just succumb to that kind of. I think it's a defeatist attitude.
Yeah.
It's this country can do wonderful things. I believe in the American people. I believe that when they are able to make the choices for their families, that ultimately collectively it puts us in a better spot, a much better spot. And I'm going to continue to fight for that right for you to choose. And
Yeah.
hopefully, what I also fight for is when you get that right to choose, that you choose us, and we do a great
Yeah.
job. But you should have the right, nonetheless, that if we don't do a good job or you don't want us, that you should be able to choose somebody else. And I think that we're just going to continue to bang that drum. Business is a lot about timing, and right now I think where our timing is really good, and that ratepayer revolt's coming because
Yeah.
utilities just can't help themselves. They just will
Right.
continue to spend your money and keep spiraling those rates higher and higher because what they think, you have no choice.
Yeah.
You have no voice. That's what they think. And they're dependent on
Yeah.
you doing nothing and saying nothing.
That's so good. And just that, how resolved you are in that is amazing. And I'm sure permeates the entire company, as you have that belief and hold true to that. So thinking about maybe a listener out there who is considering, maybe they do have an option, they're frustrated with rising utility rates, unreliable power. I guess what would you say to them? And then specifically, how can Sunnova help them achieve energy independence? And what steps should they take if they're interested in exploring your solutions?
Well, I mean, first call us up
Yeah.
and call one of our dealers up, whichever your choice is. Again, you have choice. So, what we try to provide is something that's tailored to what you want. So, for
Yeah.
instance, you may work quite a bit at home, Wes,
Yeah.
and so your demand for reliability is a lot higher, and your willingness to pay than say somebody like me that really doesn't work at home.
Yeah.
And so right now, the only thing that everybody did over the last few decades is just go buy a backup diesel
Uh-huh.
generators, right? Now we have the ability to take in technology and think about this. Those generators, we're not against generators. We deal with those too, natural gas fired predominantly. But the cost to maintain those things is
Right. Uh-huh.
really high. And so when you take that cost over a very small number of hours that you would need it for that year, that's pretty expensive. But if you
Yeah.
have solar and storage that then you can use constantly every single day, and it's there for those times where the utility isn't there, then that cost can be essentially amortized over a larger number of kilowatt hours. It even impacts about how we think about the cost structure and delivery of service between, generators and solar and storage. So further to that, there's also software you can do from your iPhone where you can turn off and on the loads in your house to further stretch out your batteries or to maintain, not hit, consume power than maybe when it's really expensive to take advantage of that through a
Yeah.
service provider like us. So there's a lot of different options. It is limited by the regulatory structure where you are. So your politicians are limiting what you can and cannot do. And the other piece of this is that, again, it may be something that is more specific and enabling in that particular area of the country. So, for instance, Alaska operates very differently through the seasonality than, say, Puerto Rico does, to give you
Sure.
some extremes. So there's some other things that go in within that. No, we're not going to advocate you clear cutting trees to go put the solar up and so forth. So if you have a home that you got trees over it, in a storm area like Houston, you might want to watch that. I have a lot of friends that had some trees falling in their house. They
Yeah.
cut them down earlier. But
Yeah.
in another place where you don't, maybe in the middle of the country,
Right.
maybe it doesn't matter as much. So there's a lot of like regional and personal specifics that we can help work with our dealers to craft you a solution that makes sense for you and your family.
And I think that's a lot of the resistance, at least that I've heard in talking to people that they don't have solar, they're curious, they're interested, they're starting to ask questions, is they really don't know where to start. And I think there's some caution behind, I think to put it plainly, like there's been some bad actors and you've heard some stories. And unfortunately, that's what gets promoted over and over and over again to where they go, oh, God, I don't know who to call. I don't want to have a bad circumstance or get ripped off or have this issue. So I think anything that's just pointing people in the right direction to go. So they can go check Sunnova out, obviously make a call and you'll work with them on their unique case and sort of piecing that together, which I think is really key.
Yeah, and that's a key part. We've been a big proponent of a couple of things. One is consumer protection.
Yeah.
And look, again, there needs to be an overhaul. I would hope it would be in the federal level, but I know power is pretty much regulated on the local level, state level. But to have some sort of better consumer protection, that also needs to go to the utilities too.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are poking behind the scenes, some of these folks and so forth, the politics that have gotten involved in this stuff with the Democrats and Republicans. And I've made a point that no solar panels ever voted D or an R. I mean,
right.
If you're politicizing something,
you
should be able to get behind it regardless of who you're going to vote for in November. And then the other thing is mandating service. We've been a huge proponent of this. Make it illegal to put, quote, panels on your roof or a battery in your garage without having a financially viable entity that has to maybe post financials with the respective state, like insurance companies, where you're guaranteeing that customer that service over that term of that contract, in our case, 25 years. That should be mandated. That should be law. And why it isn't is, again, the government or governments, in the case of states, are behind the times as far as technology. In this case, way behind. It's usual that they're behind.
Yeah.
They're way behind. They need to get with the program and really start having proactive solutions to this instead of just, well, I'm going to stamp out, because there's a few bad apples in the bunch.
Yeah.
I'm going to stamp the whole orchard out. We've never done that as a country, but for obvious reasons, that doesn't make any sense. What we need to do is be thoughtful about how do we proactively protect consumers and move forward in a structure that's fair to consumers and fair to business to compete for those consumers.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff. And I'm curious. So it's been somewhat of an unusual year in some respects. You've seen some companies in the renewable space doing really well, some having a really hard time, and kind of vice versa. If you look over, going into next year, where's your confidence level? How are you feeling about the industry as a whole?
I feel pretty good about where we are as an industry. I think we are coming out of a slump. I think that the speed of which interest rates went up rather than the absolute amount really was the big thing. And I think that we're going to have a delayed reaction in the overall economy. Think mortgage rates. Eventually the chickens will come home to roost. Eventually those mortgages do end, and eventually people do, for whatever life reason, have to move and break it. So I think we're starting, well, it's not the right word to use, but I'm pretty certain that we are moving into a much more difficult environment economically. And I make that point because our industry, I believe, to be counter-cyclical, just like the electric utilities themselves. And you always need power, and when you're not doing as well financially and you have to pay a bill, you're going to spend not much more time figuring out how to pay that bill less, right? And a number of our customers, I mean a huge chunk, are now that signed up with us 3+ years ago, are now paying 50% or less than what they're paying the utility for the same power.
Wow.
Because they lost
That's huge.
And so when you look at the potential for our industry, we've got utility rates moving up, we've got utility reliability moving down, and we've got equipment pricing on solar modules, batteries, inverters, everything moving down. And part of that is there's a massive overbuild centered in China. 4-to-1 as is estimated, supplied at a global demand. But on top of that, what did we do as a country? We said, let's go build more. Because it's not made here, we want it to be made here. I'm not going to get into the political argument about whether that's a good idea or not. Interestingly, both Democrats and Republicans both agree that it's a good idea. Whether it is or not, the only thing they agree on is anything anti-China. So when
Yeah.
you look at where we're going to go as an industry, you cannot, in my opinion, be constructive on equipment pricing anytime soon. There's a massive oversupply. More supply is coming.
Yeah.
And when you look at how the original equipment manufacturers, Tesla's a great example, just came out with the Powerwall 3, they're innovating product on top of that, getting better, more efficient,
Yeah.
better performance, et cetera. So I'm pretty optimistic that, when you have the utility rates doing this, equipment pricing doing this, that wedge is the value wedge for the consumer. That's growing.
Right.
And then add on top of that, maybe interest rates even coming down.
Yeah.
You've got a really nice growth story here that I think will surprise to the upside, maybe by quite a lot.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, that price gap or what have you, if you will, is going to get worse or bigger, and I guess in a way, as you said, sort of natural gas. I think you said is an all-time low. I believe is what you shared in the beginning, and that's going to increase. So your prices are going to go up even more. So that's a really great analysis and perspective, and great way to sort of like put it all, wrap it up in a bow. Is really nice. So getting closer to time here, and I just want to open it up. So I guess anything that's coming from Sunnova, things that people should look out for, maybe things that are in the works that you can share, anything that you're excited about it's in the works.
I'm excited about really having a lot of solar and batteries out there, and the key is batteries to really
Yeah.
be able to enable more and more of an aggregation of consumers, customers of ours, to be able to participate in the wholesale market. And the software and the managing the load that goes around with that is starting to get more, and the hardware associated with that load management is starting to get more accepted by the costs is coming down.
Yeah.
So I really think that this vision that we have of the power system becoming more like the internet, I think we're very much there, and I think that the whole whether you want to call it virtual power plant, grid services, we call it energy services, aggregation, whatever it is that you want to refer to it as, but that collective ability to move power and capacity and other services into the wholesale market and then have that benefit be shared to consumers, I think is the most exciting thing we have going.
Yeah.
Second would be the microgrid business. I see whether it's funny, it's even in the Permian with oil and gas wells.
Yeah.
You can't get power from the utilities there because utilities move whenever they want to move, and they're building microgrids. And then you've got the data centers building microgrids. You got home builders building microgrids because they can't get service from the utility. So there's a lot of people building these microgrids. And what's interesting about it is, if you think about it, electric utility, no matter how big they are, they all started from a little baby microgrid. Someday they put one generator, a couple of generators through some wires together.
Yeah.
The genesis of the utility. So we are restructuring the physical industry to meet the new demands at a better price, at a better service for the consumers. And so I'm real excited about the utility side of the business as well.
Yeah. That's a really cool way to think about it. I don't think I've ever really pieced all that together in my mind, but that's a really, really cool point. Any other things that you want to share, just key takeaways or anything else you'd want to share with the audience out there?
No, I think that we got a lot on our mind right now about the politics and the election, and I want to say this, that I think that the industry writ large has done a good job of coming together with the existing part of the industry, yes, hydrocarbon and so forth, and I think that regardless of the election outcome, I think that we're on a consistent policy path. It doesn't mean there won't be some bumps, but I think there'll be bumps rather than huge changes. And I don't think there's any way turning back. I think things like putting factories here in the United States, it does change the political calculus materially. And I think those politicians that you even voice strongly, like, no, I really want to repeal the IRA, they really don't. You can see that resistance to the Inflation Reduction Act and the energy portion really fade quite substantially before the election. After the election, think about it, you're going to have a lot more folks, at least quietly behind the scenes, going, I'm not going to vote to repeal that because there's too many jobs in my district. And by the way, jobs these days, it kind of becoming harder and harder to come by. So you can go get somebody else to vote for. I'm not doing that. And so I really think that we've ended up in a good spot. We need all forms of energy at this point in time. And so moving together, I think is really the democracy, the democratic system has worked, and we've ended up in a place where it wouldn't have been where I've designed it. For instance, pricing carbon through tax credits. Yeah. What I would want, I just want a straight carbon tax, but it doesn't matter what I wanted or want. It's where we are now, and I think regardless of what the election outcome is, we're going to be going down this path as a country. So I think the consistency of policy from the business community standpoint is key and fundamental to us being successful, and I think it will be intact regardless of the outcome.
Yeah, that's so good. It's such a great, just wrapping up the conversation. So, John, it's really been inspiring, hearing a bit about your journey, your dedication to empowering consumers with energy independence and the innovative solutions Sunnova is bringing to the renewable energy landscape. Really appreciate you sharing just your insights and your passion, which comes through very clearly with us today. To the audience out there, as always, thanks for listening to Green Giants, Titans of Renewable Energy. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, share it with your network, and join us next time for more inspiring episodes and stories from the leaders shaping the future of clean energy.
This episode of Green Giants, Titans of Renewable Energy, was brought to you by Lee Group Search. If you enjoyed today's discussion and are looking to recruit top talent for your company or find your next career opportunity in the renewable energy sector, visit leegroupsearch.com. Let's continue driving the future of clean energy together. Until next time, keep pushing toward a greener future.